Well, good afternoon, listeners. Thank you so much for coming on to listen to Lament of Hope podcast. It's always a gift to speak with you and to also have so many different interviewees on over these past 2.5 years. And today I'm speaking with musician Harry Gregson-Williams. He has done numerous scores for film and is currently working on a project now. So I'm very grateful that he's taking the time to do this. Personally, one of the scores I've loved the most is his Narnia scores. I mean, that's a long time ago now. But I love the music from that film series, and it's been something I've played over and over again, whether it's been studying or relaxing or even just wanting some hopeful music. Um, it's been a gift. So, Harry, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
You're very welcome. Yeah, it's no surprise to hear you say, of all the scores I've done, I've probably done over 100 scores in the last 30 years. But I often get approached about the Narnia scores because I think the movies themselves meant a little bit more than just telling a story. There's obviously overtones, a religious overtone to the whole way the story is constructed. And that was very intentional by C.S. Lewis. So, and for my own part, I couldn't really have imagined when my mum read me *The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe* when I was probably 5 or 6. I don't know, quite a while back that is. But that I would, one day do the film, the Hollywood film version of it. So I was really thrilled to do that. It's a little treasure. I'm not sure how well the film ages in terms of like some of the prosthetics or Mr. Tumnus or whatever. It's a little bit funky. I know this because my oldest two children were little when I was doing that, and then became of the right age to want to see it, and they did, and they liked it. And then, I guess wheel on about 20 years or something, and my other subsequent children have had difficulty not liking it and finding it charming, but just connecting with it as a film, as a movie experience. And I don't think it's because the message has changed or anything like that, but more rather, yeah, it just a little, maybe the visual effects or some of it feels a little dated somehow, but nonetheless, it's definitely a happy memory for me.
I mean, that's funny because it's been a while now, but I interviewed one of the actors who played in the BBC Narnia, going even farther back when the beavers were actually people in costumes. And I still love that. And that is, if you're asking about outdated, that's very outdated.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about outdated. Just I think kids, with the changing of the guard and changing of times. I mean, for instance, I was lucky enough to do I was lucky enough to do the score for one of the very first computer-generated animations. So I had, the great fortune to work on Ants, which had Woody Allen
Hmm.
and rest of the cast now. Sylvester Stallone was in it. And looking back at the animation to that now, it's quite basic. It's not awful, but it's not what, if you put that in front of a child now, who are used to seeing where animation's gone, they would notice it would be a little clunky. And the realism that, say, Pixar and all the other studios, DreamWorks, have achieved. Even the first Shrek that I did isn't really a patch technically on the last Shrek that I did, which was Shrek 4, just because of the way that the technology's gone. I do remember in Ants, there's a scene towards the end where so that we're concerned with a colony who live underneath New York. We don't know it's New York necessarily, other than it's Woody Allen is the lead voice. and the kind of climax of the film is the bad guy, whoever that is trying to flood the colony to kill the ants. And the water effects are amazing, or the water, as you might say. Their effects were amazing in that film. I mean, like stunning, like so realistic. And that was in 1998, I want to say, in 1997, 98, I don't know. And the other day, it reminded me of that. The other day, one of my children was watching much more uh, current animation. I think a movie called Flow. It's very charming,
Yes.
beautiful,
Yeah.
but which is very different animation. But the first scene there's a huge sort of scenario around some water flooding, and it hasn't changed much. It's still as brilliant. So yeah, some of the aspects of these films age a little bit, understandably. But hopefully the music. There's no reason why the music should. So if you thought the music did, or it was suggested the music didn't age well, then that's not a good sign, because hey, Mozart didn't age too bad.
No,
Nor did Beethoven. So I don't think I've got any excuse there. But yeah, the look of these films has changed a lot. But looking back to Narnia, at the time it seemed perfectly appropriate, and actually that was borne out by the box office returns of that movie, which obviously a lot of people saw it and liked it, and didn't feel it was clunky or funky. So we achieved
no,
something.
yeah. I mean, for me, like, Only the Beginning is my favorite soundtrack. Like,
Oh,
I think that's the
good.
title of one of it. It's near the end.
It's right. Yeah,
Uh,
which is a funny sort of way to end the score, only at the beginning. Yeah.
well, it's so, the way you wrote it is very hopeful and full of life. Um, I don't know, like you said, I mean, music ages well most of the time. I mean, once in a while you'll listen to something and you're like, that's different. But at the same time, I mean, I love music going. I mean, first of all, I mean classical composers, but also like, I mean, I loved the Partridge Family music, and that's popcorn music. um, but
Well,
I
similar
just,
the Beatles, for instance, they
yeah.
don't music doesn't necessarily. I don't think it ages at all. It's still as relevant and wondrous now. However, the way that it's produced and the way that it was recorded and the environment in which it was composed, um, yeah, it's very different. So it's definitely of a different time. Um, but yes, it's nice that you picked up on the hope of Narnia. But that was something that the director, who became a really good friend of mine. In fact, speaking of Shreks, he directed the first couple of Shreks. That's how I came to be doing the Narnia movies, and that's really how a career as a film composer happens. Probably like in other walks of life, although I don't really know, because this is really all I've done. But um, relationships are key. Once you've got a director who trusts you and who figures that you're going to bring something special to his film and make his film look and sound better than it possibly could with anybody else, then you kind of lock into that. And Yeah, I'm only sad that Andrew Adamson is the guy I'm talking about. He's disappeared back to New Zealand, which is where he came from, and hasn't made many movies since the Narnias. But yeah, he did the Shreks and those first couple of Narnias, and I was taken along for the ride simply because we formed a relationship and a friendship on those Shreks, and that can often happen. Um, I'm currently working on a score for Ridley Scott, Sir Ridley Scott, called The Dog Stars. Now, it depends how you say that title. The Dog Stars, the Dog's the Star, or the Dog Star. But it's based on a book. It's going to be a lovely movie. We're in post production now, so I'm kind of in the throes of it. Um,
Because
but
didn't you do Gladiator 2
I
music as
did.
well?
I've
Yeah.
also done many films for him. The Last Duel with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. The House of Gucci with Lady Gaga playing the. What else have I done? The Kingdom of Heaven,
Hmm.
which I loved. That was back in 2006 or 7 or something like that. Um, and Prometheus. Well, yeah, lots of films with Ridley Scott. Well, what I was going to say was that, might say, how did I come to be his composer for the moment? And the reason I say for the moment is nothing's forever. That's, a director has choice. He's not locked into using one composer from one film to the next. He's got a choice. Could be Hans Zimmer, could be, there are many, many other choices. So I never count my chickens. Very always hoping that a director who I like will call me again and again. But you just have to see how that pans out. But the way that I met him, or that he became aware of me as a composer, was through his brother, who sadly ended his own life about 11 or 12 years ago. But he was an amazing man and director. His name was Tony Scott, and he made some really good films. A bit different to Ridley's films, his brother's films, normally action films, thrillers, shall I say. But yeah, I had the great fortune to meet him in about 1996 here in Hollywood, and the first film I did with him was called Enemy of the State, and from that he asked me a year or so later to do Spy Game, and after that, Man on Fire, and after that, Deja Vu, Domino, all his films, to the day he died, actually. The last film that we made together was another one starring Denzel Washington. He often had Denzel in his films. And it was called Unstoppable. So whilst I was working with Tony over a number of years, quite unexpectedly, I got a call from his older brother, Ridley, who had just done Gladiator 1, the first Gladiator. So that's over 20 years ago. And his next film was to be Kingdom of Heaven. And I couldn't think why he wasn't going to use the composer who had just won an Oscar for Gladiator, who happened to be my old boss, Hans Zimmer. Yeah. Well, but that wasn't for me to question really, only that Ridley called me and said, look, I'd like you to do Kingdom of Heaven. Which, as I say, was the first film he did after Gladiator. And I was thrilled to do that because, well, for a number of reasons. Obviously, I was happy to be asked by him to do such a big film. It was a big studio film, kind of epic, set during the Crusades.
Yeah.
And I had to call his brother and say, look, Tony Ridley just called me and asked me to do his film. Just wanted to check in with you. He said, yeah, sure, go ahead, do it, but be back from whatever you're doing and recording in time to do my next film. So I just snuck in and did that one film for Ridley Scott back in the late 2000s. And yes, he circled back to me a few years later, and we've done a lot of films in the last 4 or 5 years together since his brother died.
Yeah. No, and it's not a bad name to be associated with.
Well, it's very much about relationships, and as I think I said to you before we started recording, perhaps part of a composer's job involves diplomacy. A small part, but an important part. Diplomacy, maybe that's not quite the right word, but if you imagine that a director, I'm not necessarily saying Ridley Scott, but any director who's maybe taken 4 or 5 years to get his movie to the screen, to get finance for it. Maybe he's developed the script. He's gone through the casting process. Maybe the financial aspect of it, the money, has fallen apart a couple of times and they couldn't pull it together. And then suddenly it is pulled together. So the cast are pulled together. They go off and shoot it. They come back into post-production. The actors have all stood on their marks and said their lines, so they've gone home. So he's left with maybe millions of feet of film. You've got to do something with that. And one of the things he can do with it is put music to it, in and out of any scene he wishes. And that can alter things radically.
Yeah.
for the better, hopefully. I mean, I think we know a bad score can really ruin a good film, and a good score can really help not a very good film. Um, so it's a fascinating process, but one that directors can take really seriously, because it's very necessary to get the tone right musically. I remember on Narnia, actually, the first Narnia. I remember Andrew Adamson saying to me, "Listen, obviously you've read the script." This is before I'd even seen his first cut of the film. I'd read the script and I knew the book. He said, "Look, we've got to tread carefully here now. There's a religious overtone um, with this movie, but I want to make it an experience that uh, doesn't depend on for a moviegoer, doesn't depend on your religious beliefs." Um,
Hmm.
you know, uh, the lion in Lion Witch Wardrobe is basically Jesus. If you think about it, he comes back from the dead to save people. And when writing music for Aslan and his kind of thematic material, Andrew said, "Look, don't make it don't make it too obviously religious. Yeah, I want it to be profound, but there's no need to make it churchy of any particular church or doctrine, which would be possible actually. Musically, I could have the words of the mass being sung by a choir, couldn't I? And
Sure.
that would make it thing. I could have one could do anything. So I had to tread a fine line of making the music clearly acknowledge what was going on screen and the allegory, the what's the layer that's underneath the story, um, without without pushing the audience too far and saying this is a story that you've read in the Bible,
Right.
as it necessarily is. It's maybe running parallel to that, and it has overtones of it. So with music and films, one's very aware as a film composer that the first part of my process is quite important, just finding the tone of what might work for the movie, and then, as I say, being part of me being a diplomat and part being a psychiatrist also. Because if you imagine, as I say, this imaginary director has gone off and he's possibly spent years getting to this spot. To hand his movie over to a composer who he may or may not even know very well and say, okay, provide me with the heart and soul of the movie. That's quite a big gamble for them. It's quite a stretch. So one has to be aware of that as a composer and not too needy. That doesn't mean to say that one has to tread as if on eggshells. We can be bold as a composer, but just mindful that
Yeah.
by putting our music on any given scene, it can change the scene radically, which may be a good thing, maybe what's needed. But it also can be quite a shock to a director when he hears it for the first time. So the idea is, and something I learned very much from my old boss, Hans Zimmer, was in order to collaborate fully with a director, I had to be able to provide demos for each scene, like a mock-up. So rather than have a director come over to my studio and me play the film on a screen and sit at the piano and play the music and say, this is going to be French horns, and this bit's going to be violins, and then the choir will come in here. But he's got to imagine that because I'm just playing the piano. Who's going to be able to do that? Very few directors are going to be able to have the musical knowledge to be able to see how that's going to bounce off his film or her film, and whether that's what he or she wants.
Right.
What as the technology's got better for us as composers, we have machines, samples full of instruments that can mock up very, very close the sound of an orchestra, the sound of a bagpipe, the sound of a singer, the sound of of anything you can imagine, a shakuhachi. There are samples for all these things that we can use so that we can play those notes on the keyboard and create a demo, a mock-up, sync that to the particular scene that we want to show, so that the director can sit there and actually really have a sense of what it is you're trying to do. And this has a great effect in many ways, because it's a great writing tool for us as composers, but also it just lets a director into your world, which may not be a world that he's very familiar with or she's very familiar with. The other knock-on effect of creating really good mock-ups, demos for each and every piece of music that's going to be used in the film is that further down the path, when said pieces of music have been approved by the director, in the case of a big studio movie, of which I've done a few and I'm working on right now, I'll then go to a big recording studio like Abbey Road Studios in London or like Sony Studios here in LA and have a full orchestra play that demo. Now, if I wouldn't have let the director into my world and him not have a really good sense of what that's already going to sound like, because he's listened and had the demo to listen to and probably put it into his cut of in his Avid, in his cutting room. So he's got to know the music pretty well. Okay, it's made by machines, but it's still sounding pretty much like it's going to. By not surprising him on the scoring stage in front of the orchestra, we're probably going to save tens of thousands of dollars and our jobs. Because what happens at that moment, and it's like, I don't get it. I don't. This isn't fast enough, slow enough, blue enough, red enough, beautiful enough, evil enough. Whatever it is that what the music's trying to do, we're going to have to do some serious. Christ, what am I going to do now? In front of the orchestra, the orchestra sitting there being paid. Studio time's very expensive, so it's an arduous process making these demos, but it's also a writing tool. So it's really just part of my writing process. And that's something that Hans Zimmer taught me. Gone are the days when maybe not gone entirely, possibly John Williams, who, as you all know, is probably the head boy of film music, Steven Spielberg's composer. I mean, when he does a score now, probably there has to be the trust has to be there for him to be able to sit at the piano and say, Stephen, this is sing his theme and say, look, it's going to be violins there, and the French horns will come in, as the character comes across and I'm sure Mr. Spielberg would say, yeah, great, John. I'm sure it'll be great. And it will be great. And of course, he's a genius, so it'll all be great. But us ordinary mortals, a slightly different way. We got to let the director in much closer into our world so that person isn't surprised when he comes to mix the film together, finally ready for an audience to see. I mean, if you think about it, it's a big leap of faith for someone to, particularly like a writer director, say you've written, it's taken you some time to write this film, to get it off the ground, to get finance together, to find someone who will pay these actors, to find the actors, the locations and the costumes and all the rest of it, actually managed to get a film into post-production so it's all shot, and then just give it to a composer who could completely change the tone of the thing. Not for good necessarily. So
I was gonna say it seems like
take it seriously, as you see, and it is. I guess that's the joy of it, is that it's not nothing. It actually can be the heart and soul of a movie, the music, not just the song placement, which actually isn't my job. Strangely, that job has taken, the title for that job is music supervisor, which is, I always think it's a bit weird when I see the credits, music supervisor on, I don't know, The Martian, which I know I scored. There's probably 100 minutes of music in that movie that I wrote, but music supervisor, then someone I don't recognize their name, but they didn't supervise me. music supervisor. What it really means is it's the songs, any songs, any music that isn't score. So, for instance, in Shrek, so, many a time a kid has come up to me and said, "Oh, I love your music for Shrek." Somebody come do it. I'm like, nah, that's Smash Mouth. That's not me. Uh, uh, so that would be the music supervisor who probably chose a lot of songs and played them for the director until the director was happy. That's the song that he wanted there. So score is different. So it's in a different category, I suppose you could say.
You seem very calm. Like, as you're talking about this process, you seem pretty, I mean, I know you've done it a long time, but you seem to be pretty relaxed as you talk about it, despite all these stresses that you're
Yeah.
bringing up. But I know with some composers I've talked with, they're very, it kind of goes one way or the other, very type A, where it's like completely their world. There's nothing else. It's just the music. And then for other composers, it's more, they do their best and then they look at their work and they go, well, it doesn't matter if I don't think it's the best thing, but if the director likes it, then
That's
that's it.
definitely not describing me there.
I wanted to ask you, like, what is for you,
It's like,
when you're making music, how do you process when you're doing it, and then when do you tell yourself, okay, I need to stop. I can't keep working on this.
well, there's usually a very tight deadline. The movie that I'm working on, the score that I'm working on now for Ridley Scott, as I think I said, I have to be in London in 4 weeks to record it with an orchestra and a choir. Now, that means working back in the process, Ridley Scott has had to approve every second of every minute of score, maybe 2 weeks before then, because I've got to get the music onto the music stands in London. And that's not just FedExing some music. I've got to turn my demos into scores, literally written scores, and then hand that over to a copyist who's going to put them on the music stands. And in order for me to start that process, I need Ridley to have, or any director to have signed off on each cue. Now, you might say, well, how long does that take? Well, depends how much music there is. I mentioned earlier, The Martian had about 100 minutes of music. The movie I'm working on now maybe has between 40 and 55 minutes of music.
Okay.
That's quite a lot of music. I mean, put it in context. I never, some composers, earn big bucks doing commercials, and I've never really done that. I've never really been a jingles kind of guy. But nah, I've always said no, thank you. I don't want to do a commercial. However, back in the day, Tony Scott did ask me to do a commercial once, and I didn't want to say no because he'd been so kind to me, and I loved him. I wanted to please him. Uh, it was only a 30-second piece of music I had to do. It took him about 2.5 weeks to sign off on it, to say, that's it, you've got it. So if you take that and do the math, if you've got 100 minutes of music, we can't afford 2.5 weeks for every 30 seconds in a film score. It's not going to work. So yeah, it's as I say, every beat of every bar of music has got something to say within a film, and it's no wonder that a director would be really painstaking in making sure that every beat of every bar is what he wants. So yeah, and that reflects back on me absolutely. Yeah, I'm very careful and painstaking with everything that I do, and sometimes I miss. And as a film composer, you do have to be able to find solutions when things don't go your way. Director might come to your studio and listen to a 3 or 4 minute or a 5 or 10 minute big. Oh, there's a cat behind you. Good
Yeah.
to see her. Perhaps I've been working on a cue within the score that's like a big set piece thing, and I've been working on it day and night for 2 or 3 weeks, just this piece, and then I'll pull the trigger and call the director, say, could you come to my studio and listen to this? So what happens if I play that? And he or she says, yeah, me. Firstly, I have to believe, in what I'm presenting. So I learnt that very quickly, that if I wasn't sure about it, I couldn't possibly expect anybody else to be sure about it. So given that fact, that it stands to reason from what I've just said, that if I play a 5 or 10-minute piece of music, which I really believe in, and someone reacts badly to it and says, nah, redo it, how does that feel? How are you going to react to that? It's all about solutions at that point. Okay, trying to understand what it is that it's missing. Why is it not landing for that person? What can I do about that? Is it really a complete rewrite? If that's the case, then I need to get my head around that fact and just let go of what I thought was the right thing. So yeah, that is the kind of psychological part, and the diplomatic part of being a composer. You really got to have a sense of people of working as a team member, and never lose sight of the fact that it's always the director's vision that we're after.
Do you have anxiety?
Oh, plenty of anxiety. I don't today, because I don't today. I don't know why I didn't wake up with any anxiety. My children were all in very good moods this morning, and I did a couple of composing. I did a couple of hours composing in my studio. I have a home studio, and so I'm very lucky to have that. I don't have to travel to work. I just run up some steps. So yeah, today's a very good day. But when I have anxiety, I know what it is. I know why it is. It's not a mystery. It's usually stress and pressure, outside pressure. I'm getting leaned on heavily by producers. Picture this: you agree to do a film, probably having read the script or having had a conversation with the director, who possibly you've never met before, and then you get the film, and it's horrible. It's not a film particularly like. The acting's just not there. The writing's crappy. Then what? Well, I've got to complete a contractual assignment. It hasn't happened to me very often, but I'd say probably 3 or 4 times over 100 and so scores. I'm like, why am I even doing this? Piece of nonsense. But you've got to put your heart and soul into everything that you do. But I'm very lucky. But I'm happy to say that that isn't happening to me at this moment. Not far from it, and hasn't happened to me very often. But sometimes one does. I look up at the screen and I think, really? Is that the best you could do? She's gonna blow! It's like, really? You couldn't think of any other words to describe that moment? From the screenwriter or the acting sometimes will miss its mark, shall we say. But, we all do, so whatever. But, yeah, I'm lucky enough to have done a lot of films that I think work really well as entertainment.
Can I ask you, and you can, if this is the part of the musician that's diplomatic and you need to say, I'm sorry, I can't respond, I understand. Obviously, Gladiator 2, there was so much pressure coming off of that, I would feel like, because even as an audience member, when I went to go see that movie, I mean, everyone loves the first one. And then 20 years later, you're coming back to watch the sequel. In a sense, it that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
And I have to ask you, I found the acting to be very good. I found the music to be very good. And some of the scenes with the fighting and everything were very well done. But I really did struggle with the protagonist's line where he would keep on saying, like, where death is, we are not. And it just didn't inspire me. And I thought that particular line It was said often, and it didn't make sense to me because I was like, well, you're always going into situations where there is death. So technically, I know it's not really doing it for me because
Right. Well,
you
you're
could die.
bound to come across moments
I
like
was going
that
to
in
ask
any.
you when you heard that line, did you have any feelings?
No, I didn't. It went right over my head. I mean, I assumed it was a line that someone said from Gladiator, from the original one. I don't know whether that's accurate or not, but I assumed that it was. That's why it was repeated a couple of times in this one. Maybe it's something that Maximus said, the Russell Crowe character in the first movie. I don't know, but no, no, I didn't. It didn't bother me that much. That didn't bother me at all. But I think when he was saying things like that, it was probably during a speech where he was trying to embolden people to do something and rally around him. So I was more concentrating on the emotion of what he was trying to impart as to whether he actually was imparting that, and making sure the music became stirring. And
Well, the music was
at
beautiful,
that
so
point,
you did very good job.
thank you. Yeah, it
I
was a tough assignment, that, just because. Yeah, but from a personal point of view, not easy doing a sequel to any movie. Though I have had some experience with the Shrek movies, the Narnia movies, the Equalizer movies with Denzel Washington. But a sequel to a film that you didn't do the original movie. With the Shreks, at least I did Shrek 1. With the Narnias, at least I did Narnia 1. Same with the Equalizer. So I was kind of expanding on the work that I'd already done. So on this occasion, I was having to pick up where Hans Zimmer, who's only a genius, left off. So that gave me heightened anxiety, shall we say?
well, because he was
Um,
you said he was your old boss or mentor, right?
yeah, he's the reason I came to Los Angeles in the first place. We met in a recording studio in London in early 1995, I think. He lives here, but he was over in London recording a score, I think. And I was kind of minding my own business in a recording studio in London, and he moved into the studio for a couple of months because he was writing something or recording something in that studio, and we just became really fast friends. And I was thoroughly inspired by his passion for film music, and I personally had just begun to be exposed to it, and wondered to myself whether it's something that I could do. But I wasn't very far along the path at all. But he inspired me, and I spent a lot of time with him during his stay in London, and then he left to return to his base here in LA, and I was very sad. I thought opportunity gone. But he called me, and said he called me quite unexpectedly. He called me one day, called that studio, asked to speak to me. I was probably making the tea for someone. Um, he said, he said, why don't you ditch everything there and just get a one-way ticket to America? So I said, okay, I'll be at Heathrow tomorrow morning. I didn't have to think about it too much. Yeah. So I came over here to be his assistant, which I was for a few years. And, after a while, he casts a big shadow, as you'd imagine, as do most musical powerhouses. And he helped me get a foothold and taught me a lot. And after a while, as I say, he cast a big shadow. It was tough for me to not be seen as just one of Hans's little guys. I had to make a move away from him, which I didn't really want to. So I loved sharing the studio with him. But at the time, it felt like I needed to sort of push the boat out myself, so to speak.
Yeah.
But by then, I had already got a few good credits. Like, I'd already done the first Shrek, and I'd already worked with Tony Scott on Enemy of the State and Spy Game with Robert Redford and Brad Pitt. So I had a few creds under my belt, and I only moved about a mile and a half down the road from him. I didn't move very far. Um, and obviously he's still a great friend of mine, and clearly was my mentor. Um, so yeah, that's how I started out. That's how I'm even sitting here right now.
Well, can I ask, you mentioned earlier you were talking about your faith. It seemed, at least when you were talking about Narnia, it seemed like when the director told you weren't, he would like you to be on a less sacred kind of tone and
Yes, yeah.
more of inspirational. And it's interesting because when you were saying that, personally, because I'm a Christian, I think anything beautiful and anything that reflects truth has a sacredness to it, which is one reason why I loved your score from that, is because even though you didn't have a choir or Latin lyrics or something, it was very um moving in a good way. It
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that.
transcends, it
Uh-huh.
transcends
Well,
music.
actually, I must correct you. I did have a choir. I did used a lot of choir, but I
No,
didn't
you're
let them
right.
sing
I'm sorry, not
Latin. I
choir.
didn't let them sing sort of religious,
Right. Yes,
the
thank you.
lyrics.
How does your relationship with your faith play into music? Because, like you said, if you get a score or a movie that you're not really happy about, or maybe reflects a message that you personally don't agree with, how do you work that out?
Well, I can't say that I'm not a church going person, but that's not to say that I don't have faith and have a spiritual life. But as a child, I sang with a choir in Cambridge in England, where I basically sang the praises to God twice a day, every day, between the age of 6 and 13. So that was kind of embedded in me. Um, so since then, I haven't. My spiritual life has kind of not followed that path at all. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, like you say, if something has some purity and honesty and beauty to it, then I think it's probably spiritual, and that's how I would look at it.
Do you, when you say that you moved away from that, do you mean more of that you don't follow a traditional path of what people would
Yeah.
understand? Okay.
No, I don't. I don't follow any traditional.
Was there a reason for that?
No, not really. I think I just moved. I think probably a reaction to having so much of it as a child. I moved away musically from singing that sort of thing into playing music, piano and violin and various other things through my teenagehood and into music college in London as a performing musician, but not as a singer. Uh, and so they didn't really coincide. And from there, you can see the path that I've taken, um, which actually doesn't have anything to do with any particular religion at all. Having said that, quite often I'll be writing a score and there'll be a moment on screen which needs something, how can I put it, otherworldly without without making it sound too alien or something, but
Right.
uh, something that the audience member can feel really deeply, uh, and somehow is transmitted through the music, through the screen, to that audience member as something subhuman. But that's not to say necessarily godly or anything like that. But yeah, and even in a movie like Bridget Jones, for instance. I mean, that's a slightly more basic case, but there's a love theme in that score, and that has had to be pure and honest, um, and sincere. Even in a movie like Bridget Jones, where she's sort of goofing around the place and klutzing around her love life, and not being very decisive and whatnot. One of the things that I discovered quite quickly in writing music for any movie was that it had to come from a place of sincerity and belief on my part. I couldn't stick something on a film in the case of Bridget Jones that was that I thought wasn't romantic. If I'm going to write a love theme, I want it to be what I feel would be a love theme. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So there's a
Yeah.
sincerity there. That really has to be. Otherwise, I think you get found out pretty quickly if one's just trying to use musical tropes, or if there's something not quite pure and sincere about what you're trying to do. But that could be in any movie. It could be in some dark movie that I've done, some thriller, like an Equalizer movie, with Denzel Washington going around neutralizing people. Actually, even in that movie, there are a couple of moments I can think of. I can just picture them now, where there was a very inner, uh, very personal sort of thought process that Denzel was trying to transmit on screen. No dialogue or anything, where the movie kind of went inside his thoughts, and
Hmm.
musically I had to uh, be able to kind of describe that, and often that's quite fun musically, is portraying something that's not necessarily seen on screen but that's implied. And that is part of being a film composer, is finding another dimension for the emotions other than what's literally on screen.
Yeah.
If someone's arguing on screen with their partner, perhaps, and it's a proper argument, maybe it's kind of mean or something like that. The music doesn't necessarily have to be kind of mean spirited. There could
Hmm.
be something,
Yeah.
could be some subtext that the score could tap into that we know as the audience, or we don't know, that the music's suggesting. Actually, don't take this on face value. There's more to this than meets the eye, and
Yeah.
that's always fun, manipulating uh, the characters on screen. It's often said that music is like another character in a scene. Can be.
Yeah. No, for sure. I would wonder, from what you said though, as a musician, do you have to have some sort of worldview of your own that you have to stick to in your music? So if somebody asks you to do music, like, yes, you're going to change the music based on the scenes and the feel, but you have to be decisive about it. So is there, if it makes sense, and maybe this is just too vague, but I'm trying to find the words for it, um, your own, like when someone gets you, Harry Gregson-Williams, you have your particular stamp on that type of music
Yeah.
that
Well,
is you.
hopefully. I mean, yeah. Right. Yes. Well,
If that
hopefully
makes sense.
that's definitely the hope. That one has. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I had some students from where were they from? USC, one of the university, uh, studying film music. It was kind of scary bunch of people. Um, I had them visit my studio, and I often have students coming by, um, and because I love to impart whatever I can, and often that's something that I try and inspire them with and leave them with, is that it can be tricky as a composer, feeling that you're vulnerable and not quite enough, and that writing something, creating something original, uh, is very, very, very tough, because what is original? I mean, haven't all these chords and notes been done a million times before? And I always say to them, the way I feel about it is, there are various chord shifts, harmonic chord shifts or melodic paths
Hmm,
that that move me,
right.
and when I look back, have always moved me since I can remember listening to music and creating music. And so to me, that's me. I mean, the thing is, it's probably 10,000 people before me, or even currently, but I have to ignore that. That's those things I kind of have become my way of writing music. Now, you could easily listen to my score and say, well, it's not very original because I hear this, that, and the other. That would be a fair enough comment. But as a composer, you have to start somewhere. You have to have some little boundary of where you feel this is my playground. This is in harmonically, where if I want to move an audience member at a certain moment as a certain chord shift that I maybe don't use every time. It's not like I'm repeating myself, but it's something that means something to me, so that I feel it could mean something to you, if that
Yeah.
makes any sense. Um, because I think as young composers that, or composers starting out who aren't necessarily young, um, yeah, it's tricky, because how can we can't all be John Williams or Hans Zimmer, the absolute beasts at this. We're all trying to do the best we can, and I think I've often felt that part of my role as a teacher, whenever I have the opportunity with students, is to give them confidence that they can lay down a kind of palette that they can call their own. They can. It's allowable. It is. Have other people used those chord shifts before? Yeah. And will they again? Yeah. But I'm not talking about copying someone, but there are various. That's why one person might be drawn towards Mozart, and somebody else might be drawn towards Radiohead. I mean, obviously, it's whatever you like, it's whatever you respond to. So obviously, we have those influences in us, and I think the skill of a composer is to somehow mash that up into some sort of a pie that you can use in order to help tell a story on screen, and that's
Yeah.
basically it in a nutshell, or in a pie shell.
Just to respect your time, for one more question, is there a work you've done, a piece of music, and it could be a track or a specific theme, um, that you think captures who you are as a person, if it was just a play that you really
Um,
resonate with?
oh, I tell you what, that's a tricky old question. It might not be. I mean, had you not started out saying that one of your favorite pieces was Only the Beginning from Narnia, I might say that. So I'm not going to say that. But maybe the opening theme from Shrek is very, very me, always has been. And I don't mean the Smash Mouth bit. I wish I did, but I don't. Um, well, the opening titles of a film that I did with Ben Affleck, the first film that he ever directed. I've done a few scores for him. Not movies that he's acted in, but movies that he actually directed. He wrote the screenplay as well for Gone Baby Gone. And yeah, he was a funny old bird to write for, because he's got a big guy, and tall, and I'm not. So he kind of towers over me and gives you really, really big bear hugs. But he wanted a melody. Yeah, I remember he stood in my studio and he said, "Yeah, so for this character, or for this film, I want to." Oh, that goes the cuckoo. I want a melody that kind of gets me here, not here or down here. So I took that kind of mid range, right? It's sort of, if you're sitting at the piano, in the middle somewhere, not up high, and that made sense to me. He's a man's man. He wants it here. I want, but a really touching melody. He said something I can hum in the shower, something I've never heard before, and something with the simplicity and beauty of. No, I don't know what he said. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to go over here and die for a moment. How the heck am I going to? Is
See,
that all you
that's
want?
when I
That's as
would.
simple as that?
Yeah,
Huh?
that's when I
Yeah,
personally would be like,
yeah.
"It was really nice meeting
So
you."
no. One evening, I sat at the piano and wrote a tune, very, very simple tune, and I was lucky enough to have a lovely orchestra which we recorded here in LA. And so, yeah, maybe the opening title of that, because I remember when I first played it for him, he loved it. And there's nothing quite like that. When someone's unequivocally like, "Oh, I love it, play it again." I'm like, yes. It doesn't always go that way. So yeah, that theme I'm fond of, because it brings me hope and gives me reminds me that things can really, really feel good when they go well.
Hit you here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was such a gift to talk with you, and I have to say, I know there are geniuses to music that we all name, but your
Yes.
music is definitely a gift to people, and it's blessed me, so thank you for your music. And thank you for the work that you do.
Well, you're welcome. I'm really happy to contribute to your podcast.